I am a psychic medium. I'm an afterlife researcher. I also specialize in something called ITC, which is instrumental transcommunication, using different pieces of equipment in addition to my intuitive abilities to communicate with the other
Today's
side.
guest is Joshua Lewis of Hope Paranormal. He's a psychic medium and creator of the Hope Spirit Box, a technology that is designed for us to connect directly with our loved ones.
The more I do this, the less I feel like I know. And I started capturing amazing evidence, evidence that was undeniable, proof that there were messages coming from something on the other side. What it was, I didn't know.
And so now for my conversation with Josh Lewis.
Hey everyone! I'm really excited to let you know about the science and spirituality salons I'm now hosting. During these intimate events, a scientifically verified psychic medium will give all of you readings, and I will give a talk on the science and evidence that changed my mind about an afterlife. This will also be an amazing opportunity to get to meet some of you in person or virtually, and to share more about all the science and data that transformed my worldview and got me through my worst days. These can be hosted in your home, in a nearby cafe with a private room, or they can even be virtual. I've hosted a few already, and they were really special, fascinating, emotional, evidential. So if you're interested in getting a small group together over dinner, brunch, drinks, coffee, to learn more about the science and to get evidential medium readings, send me an email at hello@wtfjusthappened.net and put science and spirituality in the title. I'm speaking with Josh from Hope Paranormal. Welcome, Josh.
Thanks for having me on, Liz.
Sure. Thanks for coming on. I know you do some pretty unique approach to all of this. So, do you want to introduce yourself? Tell everyone a bit about what you're working on and what you do.
Yeah, my name is Josh Lewis. I am a psychic medium. I'm an afterlife researcher. I also specialize in something called ITC, which is instrumental transcommunication, using different pieces of equipment in addition to my intuitive abilities to communicate with the other side.
Yeah. So tell me, when did you first notice you had these abilities? Do psychic medium, intuitive? I'm not sure exactly how you refer to it.
Yeah, it's a good question. I was someone that I've had a crazy past in my life. And I talk about that in my book, Finding Hope in the Afterlife, about the craziness that definitely a troubled youth and I had a great upbringing. So, I had a great family. And so, I can't blame anything on that. But, I had to go away for a few years. And when I got out, I started a business and I made a lot of money for myself and kind of secured a big portion of my future in a sense. And so, but I was very spiritual and I felt this desire to understand more of that spirituality. I also wanted to understand more of the other side and what's really out there. I had seen shows and stuff like that, ghost adventures like many people had, and I really didn't know what to make of it. So I decided, to start researching on my own with, basic tools, voice recorders and little spirit boxes. And I'd go out to abandoned buildings and cemeteries, and I started capturing amazing evidence, evidence that was undeniable, proof that there were messages coming from something on the other side. What it was, I didn't know. And I invited a medium out, someone that I knew and didn't know much about mediumship or intuitive abilities or psychics or anything, was very much skeptic. Um, and inviting this person out, we discovered that, she was, getting very accurate information that I already had captured at some of these locations. And it was just a few months of working with her. And she said, "Hey, I'm getting a message," she said. And she goes, I'm getting that you are going to start picking up on messages yourself." And I'm like, come on, that's craziness. That's crazy talk. And, sure enough, a couple months after working with her, I started picking up stuff on my own, and I couldn't believe it. And then I started working with this amazing woman, another medium who is a PhD, and she's, a parapsychologist. Her name is Deborah Lin Catz, and she has this school called the International School of Clairvoyance. And I started working with her. And one of the first one of the first classes I did with her, she said, "I'm just going to give you a name, and I'm not going to tell you if they're dead or alive, or I'm not going to give you a last name, and I'm just going to say the name. And for 30 minutes, I want you to cold read that name." And that was very nerve wracking. And so I was telling her all these things, one thing after another about what I was getting. And it felt like just thoughts coming into my head, kind of a little vision, thought. And at the end of 30 minutes, not knowing if anything I've said is making any sense at all, she says, "You can stop now." And she goes, "That's my son who is still alive. And everything you said was 100% accurate." And, from that point, which was over 10 years ago to now, I've done over 3,500 mediumship readings. And in addition to those readings, I've done over thousands of box sessions using my equipment to speak with people's loved ones. So I use my ability to tune in and get accurate information, and then I ask for them to speak on my equipment, and they come through. So that's kind of my origin story there.
Well, I'm just going to back up a little. Can you just explain, first of all, what exactly is ITC, was it interdimensional transcommunication?
Instrumental transcommunication. And
Yeah.
it's a field of study that has started over 100 years ago. It was started by guys like Thomas Edison, Nikola Tesla. There's a brilliant Latvian psychologist, Konstantin Radovow, Frederick Jurgensen. And these are brilliant men. These were men that were brilliant in their fields of being a psychologist and inventors, filmmakers, and they discovered that using different apparatuses and pieces of equipment, that they could make contact with intelligent beings on the other side. Now, one can argue, well, how do we know it's loved ones? How do we know it's who we're talking to? And there really isn't 100% way to validate it's them. Oh, you just lost some of your sound. Um, and so there's really no way for us to validate 100%. But a lot of times these intelligent beings on the other side are able to answer questions that are only relevant to what they actually, what that person would know. So there are ways for them to validate, but we're using voice recorders, we're using sometimes TVs or radios, and we can use these pieces of equipment where limited responses can come through, sometimes extremely clear and very pertinent, relevant responses, direct responses to what we're asking.
And can people use anything? As you make a specific box, a spirit box, to do this. So, and is that why is that better than, say, just using a recording app on your phone? What is it this box does specifically?
Well, okay, so you've got voice recorders, which are just regular little voice recorders that any reporter would hold, and or you would have and make a memo for yourself. Of course, you've got on the phone, you've got the little voice memo app that you can record. And when you use those things and you pick up a whisper of a spirit, It's known as EVP, electronic voice phenomenon. So spirit doesn't have a voice typical to when they were alive or how we have it. We have vocal cords, so there's tone and vibration to our voice. With them, pushing that energy through to this dimension, it normally just would, just comes through as a whisper, a very faint whisper. Sometimes it could be a class A EVP, which is very loud. But what we try to do, what a spirit box does, is give the spirit a voice, a toned voice that they can use to form their own responses with. So the problem with traditional spirit boxes is like using a radio. The spirit is using bits and pieces of like a broadcast to form their own responses. The problem is that you can capture false positives. False positives are when a word comes through, but it's not the spirit coming through. It's part of the broadcast or the sound bank. So what I did is I experimented early on with using, because I didn't want false positives. I didn't want to hear something and think it's a spirit and it's not. That's very frustrating for a communicator or investigator. So I started playing around with human voice, but with no words in it. So what I will do is I'll take a voice and I'll reverse it and I will slow it down by more than half, like 60%. I'll slow it down and then I'll chop it up into small bits and randomize it. So now we've got this voice track that is complete gibberish. It's just there's no way really for a word to come through. Something may come through that sounds like a word, but unless it's a direct response, 2, 3, 4 word phrase or direct intelligent response, then I don't think it's spirit. So nothing's more amazing to me than when I'm feeding, gibberish through my box and I ask a question and I get, yes, I'm here. Yes, it's me. Hello, Josh, or my name, or they'll answer my question. Now I know that they're using that toned voice with no words in it to form their own responses. And that's what my app does, the Hope Spirit Box app. It's a free version on iOS. I'm bringing an updated version both to iOS and Android, and it will be a limited free version again, but there will be a paid upgrade if you want to unlock the full version. There will be a paid version for it, but that's coming soon.
And I just thought of this with voice AI. Do you think we'll eventually get to a point where we could have it in our loved ones' voices and they could use it
Well,
in their
that's
own voice?
interesting you asked that because first, I don't like using AI much for anything because, there's already so much skepticism around what it is I do, and I get it all the time. And I totally understand the skepticism. I still have my moments where I'm like, am I really connecting with this person? Or, that's why I'm very I scrutinize my own evidence. I try to debunk it when I can, so that I know that I'm really working with something that is real, connecting. But there's this technique that I have. It's called the Hope Voice Signature Method, and what that is where I will take if someone has their own or their loved one's voice. I can take about a minute or 2 minutes of that person's voice and do that method that I just told you, where I will reverse it, slow it, chop it up. So now I've got the person's voice, but I don't have any of their words. And then I will feed that voice through my box, but only when I have used my mediumship ability to connect with them first. So let's say I was going to speak to one of your loved ones, and it was like a grandfather, let's just say, and you sent me, a minute and a half of his voice. And so what I would do is I would do what I just told you, and then I would spend a good few minutes focusing on your grandfather. I would close my eyes. I'd have you say his name, and I would connect. I'd invite him to come through, and I would try to see him. I would try to talk to him briefly before I would then feed his own voice through the box and give him a chance to use his own voice. Something happens when we do this. Now, could he use a regular man's voice? He can. It won't sound like him as much, but it will be, you'll get responses. But when I give the person back their own voice, it's like the key to a specific lock. It resonates with him. There's a resonance there. It's a vibration that is, akin to him. So I find that when I give someone back their own voice, the responses are stronger. The connection is better. So I am doing that already, and that's what I do.
Oh, I hadn't realized it was in their own voice. I thought you just had generic. That gave me chills. I can't even put into words how emotional that would be. So it's the
Yeah.
people getting to hear messages in their loved one's voice.
That's right. And, I do a lot of, I mainly ask for people's loved ones. So, I'm mostly doing those kinds of sessions. But I do on my channel, Hope, I ask for well known people. And, I can't say 100% I know it's them. Sometimes they really come through with some really specific and accurate information that no one knew that was relevant to them. So you can make a case that it is them. But a lot of those people, those well-known people, I can get their voices from an interview or something like that. And that's when I'll take, 2 minutes of their voice and I'll do what I just described. Some people say, oh, he's just using their voice from an interview, like, he's pulling responses from an interview. And I'm going, no, absolutely not. I'm showing my sound source. This is what I'm doing. I can do this with you. You can do this yourself. I've created, a computer version of my app where it's $5 a month to use it, and you can sign up and use this, and you can upload your own loved one's voice that the program will reverse, slow, and chop up for you, and you can ask for your loved one yourself. And a lot of people do it and they send me the recordings for me to listen to, and I say, sure enough, you got a very clear response here and a clear response here. So it's not just me doing this. It's not like, oh, I'm the great Oz, only I can do this and no one else can. Anyone can do this if you have patience, persistence, and a connection, which we all have a connection to our loved ones. We can all do this.
Oh. And now you said at first you were skeptical, and then you got really strong evidence with this box. What was the first experience of your getting really strong evidence?
Well, at first, many years ago at those locations, abandoned locations, cemeteries, I was hearing, help me, um, light, the word light. I would hear my name being said very clearly. I would hear names being said when I would ask, what is your name? So that's really strong evidence right there. And then as I got better on learning how to work with this stuff, I was getting even more detailed and accurate things. I talk about it when I do live events or I give presentations on my work, which I've done a number of times. And there's a number of validations. I could be here for hours talking about all the different validations that I've got from sessions that I've done. But one that always stands out to me, which is just a great example to give to people, is I had a follower named Kimberly. She was this amazing woman. She used to follow my work. And then one day she messaged me and she said, I've got cancer, Josh, and it's terminal. And when I pass, I would like for you to reach out to, to me, for my husband. And I said, of course I will. And, sure enough, months later, she passed, and her husband, Chris, reached out to me and said, I'm supposed to contact you. And, she wanted me to ask you. And I said, sure. So I did a session, just me asking for her. And I got a lot of great responses. I'm in the light. I'm okay. It's a little rough because I didn't want to go. These are the kinds of things I was getting from the session. And I sent him the video, and he was like, this is amazing, man. But I don't want you to be offended when I say this. And I said, okay. And he goes, how do I really know it's her, though? And I said, that's a very good question, and it's an honest question. And I said, maybe you want to ask a validating question. And it doesn't mean that we're going to get an answer every time someone asks a validating question. It is hard for them to use this equipment. They can push out easier responses, but sometimes when it's really detailed, it can be tough. But, he said, I said, sure, send me something. And he said, all right, just ask her what the term muskrat means. I said, muskrat? Just that word, say that word, that's it? And he said, yes, just say that word. So I did another session. I asked for her, and I said, Kimberly, thanks for coming through the first time, but your husband, Chris, would like to know what the term muskrat means. And she gave me two responses. She said, it's in the back of my head. He had to shave my head. That's it. Very clear. And I tagged it, I captioned the response, and I sent him the response, the video, not knowing what that means. And he emailed me back, and he said that those were perfect responses. And I said, what does it mean? He says, well, when she had cancer and she was dying, she became bedridden, and she was laying all the time constantly. And, she was always worried about her hair, which she had left, getting matted in the back of her head, just laying there. So I would pick her head up and I would brush her hair. Eventually, he said I had to shave her head, and I would call her my little muskrat. And so that was a very specific thing that only him and her knew, and it was a very validating thing. Many, many times people have said, what was my nickname as a kid? Or, where were we when we did this or this? And they'll answer the question. So those kinds of things are really very powerful validations.
That's that muskrat one that's a beautiful story. Wow.
Yeah.
Was he crying? He must have gotten
Oh,
so.
he was elated. There was no question at that point for him that I had made contact with his Kimberly.
Now, can people use this where they're just having full-on conversations? Like how exactly is the user experience if someone's using it on their own? I doubt it's as good as like you and I speaking right now.
No, I mean, yeah, and I think some people have this like misconception, like, some people will say, well, why do they sound like that? Or why can they only give you short responses? And I'm always like, I always want to reach through the screen and I want to shake them because I'm like, what are you talking about?
Sorry.
We're making contact with another dimension. Um, this isn't AT&T. Like this isn't like, this isn't an iPhone where you can just call up, a phone to heaven. This is the best thing that we've got. And this is one of the most advanced things that we can do as far as I can see from any other people that are doing this work. So let's cut it a little slack sometimes, They're speaking from another dimension. It takes energy. It's consciousness. They're right here with us, but they're also, pushing it through the veil. And, that's really hard. It's almost like when, in the movie Interstellar, when Matthew McConaughey is trapped in the Tesseract at the end, and there's a veil, and he's on the other side of the bookshelf, and he's pushing against the books, but against the veil, the cheesecloth of the veil, in a sense, and it's making an impact, but it's not his full power. So he's still having to push through limited responses through Morse code or binary code, or, he's trying to do what he can and that's what they're doing. So it's not easy. It also takes a lot of time to figure out what's being said. Now, when you get a direct yes, no, I'm here, I miss you, I love you, those are very good responses. And, those can come through very clearly. But when they're trying to say something more specific, it can be difficult. So, people think that I turn this on and they just come through no problem. I hear mostly everything. But no, I don't understand. I only understand about 20-30% of what's being said in real time. And I have to go back through the session like a forensic audio expert and really review the findings, sometimes 2 and 3 times, to understand what's being said. So it's a process, and you have to really be dedicated and patient and persistent, like I said, to really be successful at this, which most people are not. They have no patience. They see that, look at this guy, he's getting great responses. They don't know the work that went into reviewing that session and the energy that went into it. And they'll download my app, and they'll try it one time with very little effort on their part, barely even trying to connect to anyone. And they're like, I'm just getting gibberish here, and I'm like, yeah, because that's how the app works. If you don't get anyone, you're just going to get gibberish. But when you do connect and you focus on someone and you ask for them, you will get responses, which is why thousands of people have sent me their recordings going, your app is amazing. I am getting responses. I'm hearing my grandfather. They're saying my name, or, they're giving me answers that only they would know. So that's where I'm like, okay, this is where it's working.
Right. And I'm a big believer in the white crow, the whole white crow quote that if all it takes is one white crow to disprove all crows are black. And then, if it happens once, that's showing that consciousness can be non physical, once with evidence,
I never heard
and
that
then if
quote
it
before. That's
keeps.
interesting. Okay, yeah, that's cool. I like that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It was William James who was researching Leonora Piper, psychic medium, I believe, like late 1800s through the early 1900s.
Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, never
Yeah.
heard that. That's really cool. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And now I want to ask you, you said you're a psychic medium, and you talked about the first time you got really strong evidence, and you were with a medium, and it was her son who was still living. So would you call that more psychic, which is communicating, getting information on living? And
Yep.
then you also, yeah.
No, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Yes, that is psychic. What I was doing there. Um, Not all psychics are mediums, but all mediums are psychics. That's what I've come to understand. So, psychic energy is, picking up on information in the field about someone, that you can do that with anything. You may pick up some future events, even though the future can change based on free will. You could pick up on past things, of course. You could pick up on thought. So there's a lot of psychic phenomenon that can happen when connecting with someone who's alive. Even you can use psychic energy to connect with the dead, where you're not necessarily talking to the dead on the other side, the deceased, but you're picking up facts about them. And then mediumship is really connecting with the person on the other side and communicating with them through a bunch of different clairs. So I am, clairvoyant where I could see. I'm clairaudient where I can hear. Claircognizant where I can just know. Clairsentient where I can feel. So those are the different clairs, and it's not like I can see it all, hear it all, feel it all, know it all. One soul may give you a little bit more in vision, one may be a little bit more vocal, so you're not going to see them as much, but you're going to hear them a little bit more. Sometimes you just kind of know stuff as it just hits you. It's more claircognizant. So, those are the different modalities, in a sense, that I could use when trying to connect. And listen, you know, um, I do. It's funny. I was looking at, like, I love baseball, so I was like looking at my stats for April, and I was just looking at, like, I did 11 readings in April. I do a lot more other sessions too. So box sessions, I was not counting in this thing, but, like, you know, I did 11 readings, and, 7 of them were amazing, and 4 of them were not. There was some hit that I was getting with 4 out of the 11, but I would count them more as like almost striking out. Now I have an additional tool where if I'm not getting them intuitively, which is rare in a sense, but I can go to my boxes, and I went to my boxes on those other 4 cases that that I wasn't connecting with as well, and their loved ones came through the boxes really amazing. So I still had something else to go to give the loved one a chance to come through. But initially, I was not connecting. So 7 out of 11, I was doing really well. I mean, almost like home runs, hitting, just nailing everything that I was getting from them. And then 4 out of the 11, not so much. And that is, and that's like a 636 batting average, which isn't bad. I mean, it's not bad. But it's tough. It's tough. You want to be 100% all the time, as I know I do. And that's just not the case. When you're real and what you do is real, and I don't want to know any information about anyone prior to a call. The way I run my readings is, let's say we had a reading, you would have booked it. You wouldn't have told me anything. All I would know is your name. We get on the phone or Zoom, and you would say your loved one's name, 2 or 3 times right then and there with me. And with my eyes closed, I would start telling you information that I'm getting, without you giving me feedback. So what I want you to do, kind of like what my teacher did in the beginning, was stay silent for at least 15 or 20 minutes of the call. And whether I'm 100% right or 50% right, I don't want you to say yes or no. And then when I've given you a number of facts, that's when I'll stop after 20 minutes and say, okay, Liz, did any of that make any sense? Is it resonating with you? And you would say, yes, everything was right on, or most of it, but you were off with this and this. And then you can give me feedback. And at that point, then you can, maybe ask your loved ones questions. So that's how I conduct my readings, which is a great way to do it.
If you want to learn how I went from being a skeptical atheist who thought there was 0 chance of an afterlife to a skeptical atheist who thinks an afterlife is highly probable, come check out my books. WTF Just Happened.
Now, what you said, 4 of the readings were not good, and the other, I believe you said 6 were
7.
on point. 7.
I want credit for every one of them. Sorry.
Every single one. That definitely improves the odds, though still either one shows beyond the odds of chance. And
Right.
yeah. Did you have a physiologically different experience when you were getting information accurate versus not?
Here, ask that again. I hear my kid in the other room, and I heard her making noise.
Aw,
And I apologize. So just if you could ask that
oh,
again.
that's cute. So when you were accurate and your readings going accurate, do you experience that differently than when think you're getting information, they're saying no? Does it one feel different than the other?
It's so subtle. This whole thing is very subtle, and so it's not like you're getting hit with a truck of information at when it's right, and when you're wrong, you know it's coming in as thought. It's coming in as quick flashes of visions. It's coming in your own voice when it's theirs, in a sense. Like you may hear the voice. It is hard. You really have to just trust that you're going to get the information that you need. Where you just kind of say, okay, God, give me the most important information for this person. Let that come through, and then trust it. And, like I said, most of the time it works very well, but there are those times that it doesn't. And after all these years, I still have a hard time, accepting that sometimes. I know that I've worked through it, and I continue to work through it when I hit a rough patch, but it can be frustrating. So no, there's really nothing that's like, this is right and this is wrong. You just kind of have to just, when you're dialed in and you hear, when you get validated, okay, this, and this was right, then you start to feel more confident that the connection in that moment is really working well. And then you feel more confident saying anything else that's coming through. But when you tell them a few things and they're like, no, that's wrong, that starts to shut down. It starts to close the gate somewhat for me. And it's like, darn it, now I'm thinking anything else I'm going to say is going to be wrong. So, you kind of have to work through that. And, it's been, 13 years of me doing this work. And I still, I've joked about how I've never done something as much as I've done this and still really not know what the heck I'm doing. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just
Yes.
such a humbling thing, like, to do, So, yeah.
Now, do you also experience it differently when you're getting psychic information versus mediumship information?
No. No, I mean, I mean, there are times that I'll get something and I'm like, yeah, that's 100%. Like, I don't even need to ask that person. And again, that's more of just a knowing. And there's really no way to say, it's not like it came in differently, but there's just a knowing to it.
And so you shared an amazing experience when you were bringing in a loved one's, deceased wife with
Hmm.
the spirit box, Hope Spirit Box. Now, when you are on investigations, location investigations, do you have a mind blowing, what I always call what the fuck story to share from that?
It's interesting. I've been on, I used to do a lot of commercial residential investigations early on. I don't do them as much anymore. I do hold live events, 3-day retreats and weekends that I will have and different. I've done St. Augustine a couple times, New Orleans, Savannah, Charlottesville, Virginia. Like, so I've done some, I'm planning one for Key West. Um, so I will do investigations, and there are always some kind of amazing thing that happens. I did have a thing happen where we were on an investigation helping a Marine who was, back from active duty in Afghanistan. He couldn't sleep. He was having really a tough time. Um, he felt like he was being tormented in some way. And, you got to be careful because when you're doing residential investigations, not everything is going to be paranormal. In fact, a lot of times it's not. And it could be due to mental health. It could be, some other dynamic within the family. So you kind of have to play psychologist sometimes and try to figure out, is something else going on as opposed to something paranormal. But we were doing our sessions and, we were both picking up, my partner, Nikki, and I, she was, picking up some information. I was picking up some information about, and there were names that we were getting, and they were of Afghan men, soldiers that we were getting. And this guy was a sniper, and he had, in battle, you know, claimed some lives, from his, battle. And these were some of the victims that he had, shot. And we were getting that information. Now, we didn't know anything from him. We were gathering information first, and then we bring that information to them and say, does any of this make sense? This is what we're getting here. And it's either going to make sense or not. And so we had this, we had names, and we had, a number of people, what they looked like, and all this. And so after we conducted our initial investigation without him in the house, then we brought him back in and we told him about it. And he said, yes, that's the name of my first, the first, person I shot on the field. And they wanted to torment him and trying to get him to commit or trying to take his own life, for taking theirs. And so we had to, say a prayer. We had to actively, get them out of the house, away from him. It was a really weird case. Like, it was one of the weirdest cases. And clearly, what was amazing about it is that once we did what we did, um, this dude was fine. He never had another issue. He was perfectly fine. He slept like a baby. There was no other instances that happened. So, some could say, well, BS, man. Like, how do we know that, that that's true or whatever? Well, I always tell people, believe half of what you hear, but you can believe all of what you see. And the results were that this man found peace after we did what we did, and so what we did worked. Yeah.
I'm so glad to hear he got peace.
Yeah.
Sounds like he was really suffering. Well, and now you have done some experiments, including a really interesting one with ITC, interdimensional transcommunication. I'd love to hear about that experiment.
Yeah, you're talking about the one I think I have on my preview, or the preview video on my channel. Anyone that's interested in that. So that was with Deborah Lin Catz, my teacher. So that's the one I was telling you about. So she was, and like I said, she's a PhD. She's got one in psychology. She, is a parapsychologist as well. And she is the president of the International Remote Viewing Association, which is known as IRVA. And they're a pretty serious organization. And they were holding a conference in Virginia, and it was in conjunction with the Monroe Institute, which is another really esteemed institute of consciousness study. And so I was able to give a presentation in front of 200 plus people at that conference about the work that I'm doing, and then share with them the experiment that I did with Deborah. Now, Deborah, being a parapsychologist and a researcher herself, she conducted the experiment where she chose, like, I forgot exactly, I think three deceased remote viewers. And she wasn't going to tell me who they were. She was going to assign them target numbers. Okay, so when in remote viewing, if you wanted me to look at a location for you, where you wanted to see what I got, you would not tell me anything about the location or where it is, what it is, anything. You would assign that location a target number. Let's say 5132 or something. And you would say, okay, Josh, please look at 5132 and tell me what you see. And I would write it on a piece of paper, and I would focus, and I would start writing details about that. And then I would turn that into you, and you would analyze it. And then you may give me feedback, or you may not. You may just, and you would see how accurate it is. So that's what she did with these deceased remote viewers. And then she asked me to reach them through my boxes. So I would connect to them intuitively. I tell them what I'm getting. Oh, older man, doesn't speak English, or not from this country, or this is a woman who, has short, dark hair. And I'd get a few details about them. And then I would invite them to come through my boxes. And all three of them I pegged accurately as far as details about them. And then they came through the box very, very well. And then I turned in that information to her for her to analyze without getting any feedback on it. I've also done this with the Bigelow Institute of Consciousness Studies. So BICS, Robert Bigelow, he's, this billionaire that, has funded a lot of research and stuff like that. And so I worked with their PhD, Colm, Colm Heller, I think his name is. And so, I would, I'm sitting at home, set up, ready to go. And then I get this call, and it's going to be someone that I'm supposed to connect with. I don't know their last name. I don't know anything about them until I'm on the phone with them, where they just say only their first name. And then again, I have to look at them with psychic information, and see what I can pick up psychically, and then after I give them what I'm getting, I then asked for one of their loved ones to come through. And again, I'm turning in the information to the head PhD with no feedback at all, which is, again, nerve wracking, but it's the only way to really do this in a fair manner so that you know that you really are getting real results. And I mean, they wanted to hire me. They were so impressed with what they were getting, and or what we were getting. So it was really cool. It was really cool. I've been able
These
to do some things like that.
so interesting. And the reason you can't get feedback is then they can't prove you weren't reading the future when you were given the feedback, correct? Is
Well,
that the
they
reason?
don't want you to. They don't want to lead you in any direction. So really, what you're supposed to. The only way is to just give them the data, and then at a later time they can give you some feedback once they've been able to confirm or deny whether the information was correct. So they really don't want to do it in the middle of the experiment. They really want to just, you do your thing, turn it in, and then we'll let you know later on if what you got was right or not.
Oh, so you can get feedback later. Okay. I know
Later
with
on you
some of
can,
the
yeah.
Windbridge ones, like you will never, mediums will never know their results because it could interfere with them reading the future, apparently. They just can't eliminate that. But
I've heard of the Windbridge Institute. Yeah, I mean, that's not what these two researchers did. Once they gathered all the information and was able to validate what was right or what was off, then they were able to tell me, I mean, kind of vaguely. I mean, they didn't give me full on detail, but they said, this is what you did get and what, whatever. So, but the experiment was over at that point, so it was okay to give me feedback.
okay. Okay. So you just weren't getting immediate feedback. I wasn't sure if
No,
it's one of the
right,
ones where you could never get feedback, which I know
right.
some experiments have rules about that. Um, do you think, are there certain, I guess, people or, deceased beings who used to be people who are much better at ITC than others?
That's interesting. First of all, older people a lot of times don't work well with my technology on the other side. They work better with their voice recorders. Those things, like the basic voice recorder, they do well with older people. They still
Can I
can
ask you
come
what you
through.
mean by older? Is that people who passed when they were older, or could it
That's
be
what I
someone who
meant to say.
died like
Yes.
100 years ago, but they died at like 20? So,
Right. Well, that's another thing too, because if they died 100 years ago, some of the technology wasn't invented. Do they know about it today? Yes, they do, but they may have not used it when they were alive. So there is a bit of a learning curve. Some people have this misconception that once you get to the other side, you become all knowing. There's never any you just it's all just rainbows and butterflies. And yes, there is a lot of rainbows and butterflies, but there's also still human emotion at times, depending on what level you're on. And so, you know, I find that some people, the people that do very well, are entertainers, singers, actors. I think because they're really good at communicating when they were here, or there's some technological aspect to it, of production, maybe. Younger people do pretty well. People that died when they were younger, they do pretty well. So yeah, yeah.
oh. Now, I don't expect you to actually know this, but if you could just theorize, how would you guess this works scientifically?
Well, I mean, are you talking about psychic mediumship phenomenon, or are you talking about the box stuff?
I meant the box stuff, but I guess both of them. Or,
Okay. Well, I mean, just talking about instrumental transcommunication, um, it seems like there is something on the other side that they have, a piece of device, some kind of piece of equipment that they have on the other side. I know it sounds weird. I don't know if that's true. I don't really know. I've heard them talk about it. I've also seen balls of light that I'm able to capture on camera where they're entering my head or they're entering the box. So I do see them entering me or the equipment when using it. So there is some kind of interaction with this light that they show up as an orb, which is, thought, consciousness. Like that's what we are. Our souls are consciousness and it's made up of light. And inside of you there is an orb of light that is your soul, and it's operating your body. And same with me. And when your body stops, there's a ball of light that will leave your body, and that can travel instantly to many different locations. And it could be, it's just amazing to see it. So I do see them interacting with the equipment. They're taking, like I said, that gibberish sound, and they're manipulating it to form their own responses with it. So scientifically, that's what's happening. Where is that happening? At what part of the chain of where that's happening? I don't know. You know what I mean? I don't know. Um, and, when it's working with like mediumship or psychic, it's like tuning into their vibration, getting on the same resonance. And, excuse me, when you ring a bell and there's another bell that is of the same tone, it can make that bell ring. I'm kind of like, loosely explaining this, but so there's a resonance. And when you tune into the same vibration of someone else, you bring yourself to that, to their vibration, then communication can happen. So that's what's happening on a psychic mediumship level. And it's amazing because we're really, they talk about string theory, about splitting a molecule and separating it by distance, and one half spins and simultaneously the other half spins. There's no delay, which shows that there's almost no separation of distance. And I think that's really what's going on when it comes time for communication. Like, for instance, and I talk about this in my book kind of, briefly, that, we've all experienced getting a thought of a friend, and then our phone rings and it's the friend. That's all happened on some level to most people, something like that. And, it's like thought travels faster than light, if that's even possible. And I don't know how that works, but, I know that it's like the field, like the flower of life is the field. And it's the fabric of space time that connects us all. And, when I set an intention, hey, I'm going to call Liz, there's a thought that light, you know, bioluminescence, it's like there's like a, light particles leave my body with that thought, with that intention in there, and it travels along the field faster, like string theory almost. It's like, it's quick, and it will reach you faster than the phone call will reach you, which is why you'll get the thought before the call will come through. So, that's what happens. If I looked to tune into you, I would start picking up things about your information, about you. And I could do that with someone who's in Australia. I'm here in South Florida. I have one of these great connections with a patron of mine she's in Australia. And I mean, every time she asks for a loved one, a pet, it doesn't matter. She gets amazing responses. and they're able to just be here instantly with me and then be back there with her. I mean, that's half across the world. I mean, that's the other side of the world. So distance really is not, it's not a thing, but we think it is because we are physically in this reality right now.
Yeah. I'm obsessed also with string theory, quantum entanglement, split
Yep,
particle. I love physics. Yeah.
it's
Um,
amazing. We don't understand it, but it's amazing.
it absolutely is. And I also think it's going to tie into explaining this one
It
day.
definitely will.
You mentioned pets. Can people ever hear like a bark or a meow on these?
More than that, and that's where it really gets weird. Um, Years ago, 2018, 19, I started playing around with, well, what happens when we ask for the pets through the box? And I started getting actual responses. Now, some could say, is that a guide that's speaking for them? Like, is it a spirit speaking for the animal? Um, no, I don't think so. I think there's no language barrier on the other side. So when I'm asking for someone's pet and I'm hearing, I miss you, I'm here with you, I see, like we ask specific questions, we get some very specific answers, um, and it's in English. Well, someone will say, well, that's crazy. Like, I mean, I could believe you're talking to someone that's a person, but now you're going to tell me that this animal is speaking to you in English. And I would say, I totally understand. I'm not telling you to believe anything. This is just what I'm getting. And the results are undeniable that they are responses. Is it the pet? I don't know. I think it is, but that's up to you to make that determination. Um, I have asked for people that didn't speak English when they were alive, and even though I may get a word or two in their native language, I mainly get the messages in English. When someone who's German or French or Spanish downloads my app and uses my app, they don't get responses in English. They don't get responses, they get responses in their language. So, that's what happens. So I think there's no language barrier on the other side. How does that work scientifically? I have no idea.
Right. Well, it's almost like if we are non physical beings and we use these bodies to communicate and experience being here, it's almost like while we're on the other side, we could also use technology. It's just like we make up the symbols of like, this means this means this. So it's like, why could you not, I mean, the thought's not fully together, so it might not be that
No,
clear.
but I mean, it
But
makes sense because it's like,
mhm,
you know, we don't have our brains anymore, but their consciousness, the mind is still within the consciousness, in the ball of light. And, I think that communication is done by thought telepathically on the other side. So why isn't that, happening into this reality and it's just happening in the language that we understand? So I mean, it's just, the more I do this, the less I feel like I know. So I think it's a very humbling thing. Like there's a famous line like from that song, the Red Hot Chili Peppers, the more I see, the less I know, the more I'd like to let it go. And it's like, I really get that. When I was first starting out in this field many, many years ago, I felt like I was a genius and I knew so much already. And then skip to year 13 and I've done so much, so many sessions, readings and investigations. And yes, I do know a lot more than I did back then, but it feels like I've discovered there's so much more that I don't know. So it feels like I just still am scratching the surface.
right. Oh, fascinating. And I'm going to ask you, Where do you see this going in the future? It's still very early technology. What how do you envision it?
Well, it's still ahead of its time because, there's a quote that I heard not too long ago that science can only prove what society is willing to accept. And I know that's kind of like, is that true? Well, yes, because we've been able to prove that instrumental transcommunication is real when done in a controlled environment with, certain controls in place. Yes, we can get visual evidence, audible evidence, factual, intelligent responses, yet mainstream science is still not ready to accept it, and the majority of the public is still not ready to accept it. So, with that being the case, it makes someone like myself, what I'm doing, to be very difficult. Now, eventually, it will catch up to it. Like, mainstream science will catch up to it. But this is just very much ahead of its time. And does that mean that we shouldn't be doing it? No, we should be doing it, and we should continue to try to push it forward as much as we can. There are people out there that are frauds, that are fakes. I mean, I uncovered a fake that's on YouTube with a lot of subscribers, and he does this very similar work that I do, and it's like, it's a shame. It's really painful to see one of his sessions come up, because I'm like, damn, man, like, this is muddying the waters of what we're trying to do. So, and there's no difference in, fake mediums and fake psychics that are taking advantage of people. And so that hurts us, the real ones, and pushing forward this, not to mention, there's a lot of other people. Like, I'm pushing this out on my channel. I have 170,000 subscribers on my channel. I've got over 500,000 people on TikTok. So I've got a decent following that are seeing the work. But it's really hard. There's a lot of other people that are doing really good work, but that are afraid of being ridiculed. And so they won't share it publicly, and they don't want anyone else to know about it because they don't want their reputations being tarnished or attacked. And I get it, but it sucks because I'd like to know what else is being done in the field. You know what I mean? So anyway, it will continue to progress, I feel like.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, I was definitely terrified to come out with these books. I'm like, people are going to think I'm a batshit crazy person, but the response has been really good. I mean, if someone thinks that, they haven't said it to me, They might say they don't agree, but I haven't gotten the ridicule I was expecting.
Yeah, I mean, I've gotten a lot of support. There is, so I'm not going to, downgrade what, or dismiss what. I've gotten a lot of support. There isn't, for, have 500,000 people following your work. Um, hey, there's something to it. You know what I mean? People are enjoying what they're seeing and learning from it. It can be difficult with the amount of attacks and hate that you can get sometimes. And it's just, I think, par for the course. But like I said, there is a lot more supportive people, and that people that do want to learn and do want to understand and want to develop their own abilities or ability to communicate using the equipment. So, it's all good.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I just want to ask you really quickly, because you did mention, this one guy's a fraud. How do you know? How could people even distinguish?
Well, I had a conversation with him, and I asked him what his process was, and he gave me some convoluted BS answer that just didn't make sense. And I said, "Well, dude, you should be able to replicate. You should be able to tell people what you're doing. See, like, you know, I tell you what I'm doing. I tell you what I'm using. I tell you how I'm using the sound source, like how I got the sound source, or what piece of equipment or whatever. And then on top of it, I'm giving you the piece of equipment to use yourself for you to get your own results. If the person can't show their face, or they can't show you their sound source, or they can't, give other people a chance to peer review it in a sense, then there's a red flag there. You know what I mean? There's a red flag there. So that was the red flag. And some of the results that I had seen were almost too good to be true. Now, some people say that about mine, and I say, "Hey, I get it. That's a compliment to the work, but this is how I got this. This is what I did, and now you can try this, or you could do this yourself." Or I don't want to know any information about anything when I do one of these readings or whatever. So, there's plenty of evidence to show my legitimacy over the years. And I've opened myself up to skeptics, and I've answered skeptics' questions. And when someone just shoots it down and doesn't answer it and ignores the public, but posts their results, but won't field any questions, or some people hide behind a camera and they don't show their faces. I mean, that's a big red flag. Like, I mean, why can't you show yourself? Like, you know what I mean? Because you're afraid of the fallout of what you're doing, or what's going on. You know what I mean? So there are some telling signs that reveal that someone's not on the up and up.
And so is there anything I haven't asked you that you'd like me to ask you? Anything else you'd like to share?
No, I would say, for people to continue to seek. I think it's important that you keep seeking no matter what. I think it's important that you create or work on your connection with a higher power of your own understanding. It doesn't have to be religious. It's about spirituality. So whether it's God or Jesus or Buddha or Allah or Krishna or whoever it is for you, or great source in the sky or within you, I think working on your own conscious contact with your higher power is just really important. Be careful about listening to others' ideas of the other side. You can listen, but be careful not to latch on to a lot of the misconceptions that are being peddled through TV or through certain mediums. There are things that you have to kind of, if it doesn't resonate, religion alone, people still hit me up with, this is, Ecclesiastes, or, and they throw Bible verses that, because it's against, and I say, no, that's not true. And there's a whole chapter dedicated in my book to discrediting those claims that the Bible is against this and that. Oh, there's certain verses, and it's like, no, that's not true. There's a lot of misinterpretation. There's a lot of omission from the Bible. There's a lot of, changing of certain books and things. So it's tough. So, don't be a sheep like that. Be a free thinker, be willing to explore and investigate and take some chances.
Yeah, I agree, definitely. And yeah, I think whether you're religious or atheist, there's still a lot of stigma about this stuff. I'm atheist, but as soon as I dug in, it just, I'm a big believer in curiosity. Stay curious
Yeah.
and you'll, yeah.
With a good
And
intention, of course, and I think that will get you, pretty far in your investigations, whatever they may be.
great. And so, lastly, remind everyone the name of your book. For those watching on video, you want to hold up your book so people can see the
Yeah,
cover.
it's
Remind, yeah.
finding hope in the afterlife, and my website is hopeparanormal.com. You can find all things hope related at hopeparanormal.com. And find me on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, all of those places I have a presence on. And but all things to to book a reading or a session with me, or partake in my mini monthly sessions that I do for people, so everyone has a chance, whether you can afford a private reading or whatever. I offer options as low as $25 for people to have a chance to reach a loved one if they want.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Liz. Really, just an honor, and I appreciate you having me on today. Thank you.
To get more information on what the fuck just happened, go to wtfjusthappened.net. There, you can order my book, WTF Just Happened, a sciencey skeptic explores grief, healing, and evidence of an afterlife. You can learn all about how I came to conclude that there most likely is an afterlife, but you can also learn about the early stages of my grief and the amazing, fascinating people I met along the way. You can read about how much I harassed the mediums and scientists trying to get evidence to see if the mediums were cheating and see if what everyone was saying actually was true. You can also subscribe to our newsletter to stay updated on any new developments and any interesting new what the fuck updates. So if you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts. It makes such a difference, especially for a new podcast like this one. And if any of you have had a crazy what the fuck yourself, have any questions, feedback, or just want to say hey, reach out on either Instagram at WTF_just_happened_, or email me at hello@WTFjusthappened.net. I love hearing from all of you. It makes my day hearing your stories and questions and feedback and all of it. And remember, you don't have to draw any final conclusions as you wonder, what the fuck just happened?